Torah, Torah, ora, Torah, ora, hallelujah. This is not good. Look at the thing going wild.
Whoa.
Whoa is right. What is happening?
Giving me a headache.
I know, me too.
Are you frozen too?
No. You. That is weird.
Whoa.
I know. I have to do something about that, don't I?
Did you just turn your computer on, or do you need to reboot it?
I don't think so. Let's see what happens. Better.
Yeah, that's better. So far.
Yep. Test. Test.
We should put one of these down there, shouldn't we?
I'm sorry?
We should put one of these things down on that side.
Hello. I had planned to.
Pardon me?
I had planned to.
Hey. Good morning.
Good morning. I have a question.
You want those?
Yes.
Yeah.
Services Friday night, and I noticed there was a Becky Mann tune.
Sherry,
Yeah.
How
would
do
you
you
put
know?
this down there?
Sure. How do you know
Hey.
Becky Mann?
Well,
Good morning.
there's lots of things. First of all, do you have connection to Baltimore Hebrew congregation? Baltimore Hebrew?
Yes, so that's how I knew, because I streamed, because my mother passed away shortly before COVID, so I streamed a lot of services. And my sister, my dad's still a member there.
Do you know my dad was a rabbi there? Have we talked about this?
Yeah. We
Okay.
had that. So, my sister said you should listen to Becca, and we loved her. Like, I would stream all her services, and she just had my sister sent me the link, her cantorial recital. So I've listened to half of it.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it good?
It's really good.
Yes, she's like kind of getting into the world of composing more than she is like cantorial stuff. I'm not to say that she's not good at it. She's yeah.
Her
So-
voice is gorgeous.
Is it okay if I donate some pods?
Sure. Pod away.
Yeah.
Pod. Right. So well, I'm just familiar with her, but Gabe, our student cantor, said said to Nashira, I have a really really beautiful Misha Berach that you should consider singing.
Yeah.
And so Nashira, the choir, they've done it twice. And it's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
I also like just her manner. Like.
Yeah, she's got a very good, nice manner.
Yeah. So,
I agree with you.
Yeah. So anyway, we were sad to see her not be the interim cantor. So.
Well, she's done, right.
Right. Yeah. Our synagogue we recently hired a new cantor, and she would have been my dream cantor. But it's been fun listening to this concert.
Yeah. Right, they have to do that for graduation.
Yeah. And she did a lot of duets with the cantor at Baltimore Hebrew.
Ben Ellerin.
Yeah.
He, I think, is really excellent.
Yeah, he's like,
He's got a really great kind of style to him. I really kind of respect him a lot.
Yeah, and I've seen him, but live too,
Right.
The services with my dad.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I like Becky very much.
Yeah.
I was impressed, and I heard that song. I haven't heard many of her other ones, but then again, just because it's not like she's she's written songs, but it's not like she's
YouTube her.
right. You have to YouTube her, correct? And so the only reason I went to this, I heard this song was just because I YouTubed her after it was recommended, and
Yeah,
it's really great.
yeah, you should,
I'll YouTube other stuff of hers,
yeah.
but know what I guess just put her name in there and just see what comes up.
Yeah, there's different
How are
stages, like I would go through withdrawal, so I'd have to go on
I was just telling the rabbi.
YouTube,
we
and
had
I
a
don't
yard
know if
sale on Saturday,
Baltimore
and
Hebrew
I
has
was
an
so
archive,
sore.
but she did a
Every
lot of
bone
services
came out, like,
from wherever she was, that was when
Mhm.
everybody was broadcasting from wherever they were.
So she's been there for a few years now.
She's not there
And
anymore.
it was
Yeah,
successful,
she
there was a lot of
there for
visitors,
couple
it was a
years.
nice day.
And
Right.
it was a beautiful day, but there were too many yard sales that day.
Will our student rabbi have Cantor have a home here?
Well, he's coming back next year.
Oh, okay.
He's got one more year, and then what he does after that is unknown. Unknown. You know, Kathy, I was thinking, you talked about yard sales. When I think of yard sale, I think of a yard sale in terms of, that's an expression used in skiing, in downhill skiing.
SAIL.
No, SALE, a yard sale. A yard sale in downhill skiing is when you ski and you fall, and one ski is over here and another ski is over here, and you got your goggles that have come off and a glove and your poles are all over the place, and you're like, everything's just all over, all over the mountain because you kind of took a little bit of a fall. And it's called a yard sale because you've got all your stuff all over the yard.
That's a yard sale.
It's a great image, though. A yard sale and skiing. So the last 10 times I've used the term yard sale, it has been it was in a skiing context.
Did you find anything good?
Pardon me?
She was selling.
I was selling.
Oh, did you get rid of stuff?
I got, what didn't sell went to Goodwill immediately. I've got one more load.
When you're doing a yard sale,
Do you know that there's still skiing going on now?
yeah, it doesn't surprise me because the guys got a lot of snow a couple weeks
Yeah.
ago. It's like when you do a yard sale, do you think to yourself, I cannot believe someone wants this?
No, I thought all my stuff was fabulous
Right.
until, people offered me 10 cents on the dollar. Of what I marked it for.
Right. But you want to get rid of it, so
I want
clearly.
to get rid of it. So at the end, I was taking anything.
Mhm.
So people bargain at yard sales, is that right?
Oh my God.
Oh, yes, they do.
And the serious ones show up an hour or 45 minutes at least before it officially starts, and they'll offer you a sum for like all the furniture.
Wow.
That looks like the stuff from yesterday.
It is the stuff from yesterday. Good morning.
It was awesome.
Yesterday was really sweet. And the slideshow was the best part.
Yeah.
It was just awesome.
And Merck kept hyping it so much, I thought, man, this had better be good. And it was. No disappointment.
right.
There were also donut holes.
I think I've been eating too much lately.
Oh,
Yeah,
I've been
me too.
celebrating all over the place.
no, and I can't walk away from Vered's goodies either. I've got to sample those. every
Yeah,
time.
Vered is a great
Oh,
cook.
yeah.
She knows
And
what she's
Barrett's food. Oh, my gosh.
doing. Those quiches were fantastic.
Yeah.
I know. I put a half a bagel on my plate and then I said the quiche and I took one of each. Oh, she's a gift too. Right along with Sarit
Yep.
and Hezi. Ah,
Yechezkiel.
Hmm?
Chezi, Yechezkiel, I call him. Because Chezi is short for Yechezkiel, Ezekiel.
oh, really?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
So I call him by his full name. Like his mother would. Yechezkiel, come here. Actually, one of the funniest things, and I know I'm doing this and it's being streamed, and so I probably regret it afterwards, but one of the funniest things I've ever heard was when Chezi was in his Arabic class here,
Mhm.
and he was describing kind of the more formal way of saying what is your name versus the more colloquial way of saying what is your name. And I asked, oh, is it kind of like in Hebrew when someone says, ma shimcha, which means what is your name, versus ech korim lecha, which translates to how are you called? Right. Now, and how are you called is the more colloquial way. Ech korim lecha, is how are you called, which, and as he was describing it, he said, no, well, ech korim lecha. So, for example, for me, it's Chezi. How are you called? Meaning, like, how do you get called in the house? Chezi.
Now remember, she's the
It was
boss
so
now.
funny.
You're welcome. I can just scoot.
Arthur, nice to see you, young man.
Thank you very much.
Once again, Arthur comes in with the full-blown sunglasses, saying he had a really late night last night.
Would it work?
Right. He's like, I gotta keep these on. Can I get a cup of coffee for you too?
New clock.
Sunny outside.
What?
It's
We didn't get
gorgeous.
it.
I don't know if we got a new clock or not. We might have.
So.
I don't pay attention. Sometimes, like,
Yeah, you automatically look there.
It's still not right.
it's right twice a day.
Different color irises opened up in my yard today, so I was taking pictures.
Do you guys get a first growth of figs, like right now, and then you get another growth later?
I did last year, but I didn't this year.
Because, right, last year I got a first growth, but this year I saw some coming around, but then I pruned my tree, because, like, if I don't, I have to cut down literally half my tree every single year these days.
Well, I
Because
should,
it gets
but I don't.
out of control, my fig tree. Like, it's like, boom, takes over the whole house.
You
So-
have to get on a ladder to get the figs down.
Well, I just yank on my branches and just bend my branches down because I'm like, you know what? Fine, if this branch breaks, who cares? I'm gonna be cutting it down anyway next year, right? It's like it's so quick. Like how fast that fig tree grows is just insane. And I was wondering though if you guys got a first growth because I cut down. I really gave my fig tree a haircut, but I did it about 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, and I thought I saw figs coming out, and I kind of felt bad about
You're
that.
not supposed to cut it this time of the year.
I know, but I didn't cut it in time last year, so I mean, at the end, so I just did. But
You can't even tell how many trees we have, except if you can look on the ground.
Right.
Because they were all one on top of the
they're all
other.
one on top of the other. It's
They wouldn't fit in this room, that's for sure.
So are your fig trees outside?
yeah,
And they do well?
amazing, amazing. We got the fig trees that Paul planted back here, also doing great. In our
How long does it take? for them
And
to
they're
bear
really
fruit?
big figs.
maybe a couple of 3 years. How long do you think your fig tree takes to bear fruit? If you put it in the ground, as literally just like a very small, maybe it take 5 years, but 3 to 5 years. But my God, our fig tree is.
I've been successful taking cuttings and starting new trees.
Yeah, but sooner or later, this whole planet is going to be a big fig tree. That's how fast these things spread.
Good.
Our yard is, all right.
Do deer come to your fig tree?
We have a lot of
can
deer in the
see.
yard, but for some reason they don't bother the fig trees.
Right.
But they used to. Without anything on them except the beginning of the leaves, 'cause they'd be eating about this height.
Right.
Since I come from the north, this is having a fig tree in one's yard is it's biblical. It's so unusual.
Well, actually, my
Each ma-
grandfather
each-
had them in Connecticut.
Wait, it's over here.
And now you just need.
Connecticut, my grandfather.
By the way,
had 'em,
so
my uncle.
just FYI, hey Bob, I'm so glad you're here. So FYI, everyone, if you have a fig tree, you just need to get yourself a vine, a grapevine, because we are commanded in the Bible, v'yashvu ish tachat gafno v'tachat te'inato, which means every man and woman should sit beneath his vine and fig tree and not be afraid of war anymore. Do you have a text, Bob? I don't think so, right? Oh my God, I don't even know what to do, how to find a text for you.
Well, my grandfather who grew figs also grew grapes and made wine.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Here,
I have deer spray. May I have a copy?
you need a copy of this?
Yeah, yes, because mine is all ripped up. And the last time I had it.
From Fury
It's just.
at how the brothers treated Joseph.
I use deer spray to keep the deer away.
Oh
Rabbi,
dear.
I spoke to Amaya this morning. She's in Israel for a couple of weeks.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, so she said, what a mess.
Uh-huh.
First of all, inflation is out of control.
Really?
Prices are out
Well,
of
that.
control.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy.
Well, we got the same thing here.
Rockets are flying out of Gaza almost daily.
Oh my God.
A lot of rockets.
Mm.
And of course, the political situation, the government, the protests constantly, the country's more divided than any time in its history.
Mm-hmm.
There's a real fear, almost like a palpable fear for the survival of the country.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Problematic.
that really hit me.
Although I saw something today, I was reading something, I haven't read it. I saw the headline today, which said that that Israel is much stronger than we think it is.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, me too. I also saw in the Washington Post this morning an article about kosher electricity.
Yes.
Like, kosher electricity? Are you kidding me?
Well, after we left Vienna, we stayed with an Orthodox family in Antwerp. And they were very Orthodox. And I remember on a Shabbat going into one of the rooms with one of the girls from the family.
Mm-hmm.
I flipped on the light. You committed a sin. So I turned it off. You committed another
That's right.
sin.
Right, but the thing about it was this had to do with the way, not about using electricity. This had to do with the way in which the electricity is provided to the houses. And I only looked briefly at the article too, but also oftentimes when I see these things, I just want to be like, who cares? But really, who cares kosher electricity? But it's like, but there's this thing about that they have this new system of generating electricity based on battery power and something that was like ill.
So, I think I always remind myself there are biblical mitzvahs and there are rabbinic mitzvahs.
Right.
And the rabbinic mitzvahs.
And then there are ones that are long after. I mean, like.
No, but I mean,
rabbinic mitzvahs mean post-biblical, right?
After the destruction of the temple, there are modern ones that the rabbis, so they're always pontificating about something. And one rabbi in Amsterdam may have a different point of view than one in Annapolis.
Or one in Barcelona, as it was so oftentimes the case.
I take a lot of it with a grain of salt.
Yes.
Not all of it.
And I totally know what you're saying. Yeah. And I completely and fully agree with you. Meaning what you're saying is sometimes these rabbis are just like, it's like they're going insane with the minutia of these laws, and they need to just kind of get back to the spirit of the law as opposed, this elevator is fine to ride on Shabbat. It's like, no, just take the stairs if you're not going to ride on something. But, or the concept of the Shabbat goy, which I am so monumentally opposed to. I find that to be sickening. But putting that aside, but the flip side is that the Bible has so many laws which they themselves are just so utterly unacceptable. Like, for example, what do you do when you have a wayward and defiant son? You kill him, right? Obviously, we don't do that. What do you do when you're not allowed to mix cotton and linen or something, which is absurd too? And so while I 100% know exactly what you're talking about, Arthur, and agree with you about like, hey, let's go with the spirit of the kind of what was meant to be the law and not how you have done these ridiculous gymnastics to kind of create some sort of loop around. And the flip side is, of course, though, I appreciate the rabbis having kind of, reinterpreted some of the messages of the Torah, the laws of the Torah, which they seem kind of like arbitrary or at least written in a different time for a different purpose.
Or extreme.
Extreme, yeah. So I see both sides, but I fully know what you're talking about and agree with you.
Rabbi,
yes, ma'am.
Were people allowed to ride in elevators when elevators had elevator operators and they did not have to push buttons?
As long as they were the ones who weren't doing the pushing and pulling, then probably yes. Although, now that I think about it, there's nothing wrong with using your arm strength.
Can Orthodox ride in a taxi or an Uber?
No.
To services?
No. And the reason why is because they are generating the reason why that car is moving. So in other words, well, certainly not an Uber because you'd need to use your smartphone to order the Uber. So now what you're saying is, well, what about if someone else orders the Uber? Can you get into it?
You could order the Uber before Shabbat.
It's a good point. So if you can order the Uber before Shabbat, since you can, no, you still can't. I just know you're not allowed to. But
So elevators are out too now, because even if someone else pushes the button, you're the one that has to get to the floor.
Correct.
How do they get in and out of their building?
Well, and the Shabbat elevator works this way. It's that it's going no matter what. And so therefore you don't do anything. All you're doing is stepping into it. You're not actually Shabbat elevator just goes next floor. It literally could be a 45-minute experience if you have a big building, but it's automatic. It's happening no matter what. But an Uber or a taxi is different because you'd have to open the door to get into the Uber. You don't have to open the door to get into the elevator.
When we have self-driving cars.
And by the way, and you should know, wait, Sherry, 1 second.
I'm ready.
And you should know something, which this very much is kind of is what living, and this is the kind of stuff that I talk about when I teach Judaism, for example, to, as in terms of when I not intro, but when I do like a lecture about Judaism, like I'll say, look, you've got the Bible. And then you've got the rabbinic Judaism, which I will say, let's say, is over the course of the next 1,000 years or 1,500 years or 1,000 years, in which they were interpreting the Bible and creating laws. Well, that was obviously the Talmud, but you get my point. But just because the Talmud ends, this is still a process which is going on all the time. Because every time there is new technology, Orthodox Judaism needs to confront it to see how and in which way they need to kind of involve them. Are you allowed to look at your watch, which has your email or a text message shooting to it? I didn't do anything. I just looked at it. I didn't initiate it. It's being automatically pushed to my watch. Should I not be able to look at it?
Is all this midrash?
What's that?
Midrash.
This is not midrash. Midrash is something different. That is more of the intertextual kind of discussions. This is legal. So this is something called responsa. And there is and responsa, as you understand, is a response, meaning someone puts a question out there, a response from the rabbis come back. Now, it used to be that, let's call it 500 years ago, that if you're in Spain, you asked your question to your local Spanish rabbi, well, 600 years ago, but if you were in Poland, you didn't go to Spain for your questions, you went to Vilna for your questions, or whatever the place may be. And the problem is that means that if it's a particularly complicated question, which really can be seen either way, is swordfish kosher? Then it doesn't have, are those fins or are those scales? It's like those scales are not, right? It's like different rabbis might answer that question differently, and thus explains why there are nuances in various different. Am I supposed to wear this? Do I have to have the side curls coming down? What is it that's the law of Judaism? Rabbi A says one thing, Rabbi B says another thing, and depending on who you think your rabbi is, that's the answer to the question. Arthur, then Jim. Laura, did you also want to talk, and I interrupted you? Someone I thought.
Nope, I'm done. Thank you.
Arthur, then Jim. Go. Oh, Sherry. Oh, wait, actually, Sherry Sherry, then Arthur, then Jim. Sherry really was. Yeah. Sherry, Arthur, Jim, Paul. Go ahead.
All right. So with the intricacies, a couple things. One is you can drive a car if it's a matter of life and death.
Yes.
So you can drive to a hospital, but then you can't turn your car off. So certain hospitals have a service where if you come in, they'll go turn your car off for you. But the other point is it's just so complicated.
Yeah.
It makes it so difficult for people to be religious because it's so much learning and it's so difficult.
And it's also so, it's nonsensical. like sometimes. But when I say nonsensical, I don't mean nonsensical like these people are so utterly arbitrary. No, it makes sense to them. So I don't want to suggest it's nonsensical, makes no sense, but to us, or that it might be that even though some rabbi came up with some sort of very sophisticated, contortion of their bodies to make this work, ultimately we're really having a hard time kind of making sense of it. You just let me drive the car to the hospital because it was a life and death situation, but turning the car off is now somehow like, can we just finish this act and then move on to act 2, which I'm not allowed to at least get in the elevator of the hospital? But like, I drove all the way here, but I can't turn my car off. Like, not even a spark. It's taking the spark out. Arthur, what were you about to say?
Two quick things. One is that a lot of this, what they call halakha, and this lady, I'm sure is familiar with it, comes out of a book called the Shulchan Aruch.
Yes.
Which translates into roughly setting the table. So a lot of these additional decisions that are decreed by the rabbis are sort of at the margin, but the vast preponderance of halakha does come out of this one central place, the Shulchan Aruch.
No, and it's only when you get to the nuances of all these things that's when it's like, what about this? What about that? Can I?
And on the issue of things that are, and you just alluded to this, so I thank you for that. I have the same response to discussions about Jesus Christ. I respect people, their rights, their privilege, their right to believe in Jesus Christ, to follow his teachings. My answer is, it's just not for me.
Right.
And by saying that, I'm not putting it down.
Right.
I'm just saying it doesn't work for me, and it's not for me, but I respect people's right to believe in it and to follow it. So, by the way, that's the same attitude that I have about even extreme Orthodox Judaism. You said it earlier. It's nonsensical to us, but it's not nonsensical to them.
Yeah, not to them.
It's the same point. Yeah.
And by the way, by the way, about Jesus, I love studying Jesus. I find it to be fascinating. And just one more thing about it really quickly, just to tell you, just so you know where I am on this. There is no doubt in my mind that he lived. There is no doubt in my mind, not only that he lived, but that he was a very, very influential figure at that time. And now I'm going to say even the most controversial thing I'll ever say is, had I lived at that time, there's probably a fairly decent chance that I would have been a follower of Jesus's.
Jews for Jesus.
Not exactly. Because it would have been because he was a Jew and he was preaching about social issues and about kindness and about like ridiculous, like turning over the moneylenders and stuff like that, and let's not and because he was opposed to the way that the temple was kind of operating and how they were just making people change money for the sake of coming up with the way specific. You get I don't need to go into all the details, but my point is that and he was turn the other cheek and so all that stuff. I'm like, I probably would have been right there as opposed to hanging out at the base of the temple, kind of with my, thinking, am I gonna, like, how do I change money so I can make a sacrifice? But obviously, where I depart is the part where he becomes the Son of God and the Messiah and resurrected and like I don't question that he died on the cross. I just question that he was resurrected 3 days later, right? And so my point is that historically speaking, I don't think there's really we don't have to throw out the baby with the bathwater as Jews. We can appreciate this person's deeply consequential contributions to kind of the world that was happening there and creating a world that in which you were able to say, hey, it doesn't all have to be like this insanity happening at the temple. There's another way of being Jewish. Something which we all agree with. But whenever we hear the word Jesus, we bristle a little bit for good reason, because first of all, there's a lot that's associated with that. We think about crucifixions, we think about crusades, all in his name and that kind of stuff. Obviously, for good reason, we bristle. And not only we bristle a little bit because we don't agree with the theology necessarily of Christianity, but when it comes to just pure Jesus, he's, we may not believe in the Son of God, but there's no reason not to think that, like, here was a really consequential, extraordinary human being who made a big difference in the lives of a lot of people, and who actually preached words that we probably would have felt much better about than the words that were being kind of talked about in 50 years prior to the destruction of the temple. Maybe even after the destruction of the temple, we would have said, yeah, I'm not so sure I agree with this kind of hardcore rabbinic Judaism, but I'm more about the social Judaism that this guy was talking about. Again, it just has to do with after the fact. That's where I get a little lost. Jim, then Paul.
On the previous issue of these
Orthodox.
various Orthodox rules, we secular peoples also have ethical problems, for example, with the genetic engineering.
Yep.
And the question is, who will decide these? Should it be the scientists? Should it be a state legislature?
Right.
Should it be a 51% vote of the Democratic?
Right.
So these ethical issues of how to use technology do not disappear.
Right. That's exactly right. Paul.
When Jesus was on the cross, he said, speaking in Armenian, I think he spoke.
Aramaic.
Aramaic, right. He said, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. Dear God, God, why have you forsaken me? So that means to me that he expected a different outcome.
Yes.
And that's noteworthy to me. The other thing I wanted to mention is that it's a sort of a story. A small Jewish village in Poland had bought a cow in Minsk, and the cow gave milk for the children. And so they said, well, maybe if we can rent a bull, the cow...
This is the joke. I know we were not going here. This is a bad joke. It's going to get hard. It's demeaning.
All right. You want me to finish it?
No, don't finish
All
it.
right,
Don't finish it. I know this joke, and it's demeaning. All right. So, did we already bless or not yet? Praise you and our God for commanding us to busy yourselves in the words of Torah. Amen. All right. So, welcome back. We are in the story of Joseph, I think, at least, right? Here's my text.
Chapter and verse, please.
Chapter and verse, please. Chapter 43, verse 11. Okay, so just to give you a little background context for those of you who are not remembering what we did last week, or for those of you, this is your first time here. All right, for Bob's sake, and I think that for all of our sake, let's just do a little bit more of a kind of a broad overview. Jacob has a bunch of sons. He chooses to, he favors one of them. Why does he favor that one son, who's Joseph? Because he is the child of his old age. We have talked about on many occasions, and it remains an important thing for us to discuss. This, by the way, is chapter 37, even though we're on chapter 43. But it remains for us important to discuss. It is not clear whether Joseph has a younger brother when he is 17 years old, leaving when he is thrown into the pit. It is not clear. I can give just as much evidence for Benjamin not being born yet as I can give for Benjamin being born. And I think I fall more on the side of the minority opinion, which is that he's not born yet. And because the text is begging us to think that he's been born, because it talks about his birth prior to chapter 37. I think chapter 36 or 35, no, 36, 30, one of those two talks about the birth of Benjamin, which happens at least one chapter, if not two, before Joseph and his coat and get thrown into a pit. So everyone who reads this would think, of course Benjamin's born, it happened 2 chapters earlier. But I just think there's so much evidence to suggest that Benjamin is not yet born.
But Torah is not necessarily chronological.
That is correct. Well, That is correct and incorrect. Why do I say both? You are, yes, 100% correct. There is a very famous maxim in the Torah, by the rabbis, which says there's no early, there's no late in the Torah, meaning that the Torah is like a textbook, and that you just, and doesn't matter if something happened. Abraham went to the yeshiva, told Sarah that he was sending Isaac to the yeshiva. What yeshiva? He was the first Jew, right? But the rabbis are like, yeah, of course you're sending to the yeshiva. In other words, so therefore, no early, no late in the Torah. It doesn't matter where it falls chronologically. So you are 100% correct in there. But at the same time, certainly the Torah is trying to communicate a chronology, even though the rabbis then say it's not the case. But, it's communicating that the reason why we're in Egypt is because Jacob brought us to Egypt. In other words, you get the point. So number one is that we got Joseph. It's not clear if Benjamin's born yet. What we do know is that Joseph is the favorite, gets thrown in a pit because the brothers are jealous. Joseph goes down to Egypt because he is sold into slavery. Joseph rises into greatness because of his personality and with the help of God, at least Joseph says. Meanwhile, there's famine in the whole region. The brothers are confronted by their father and say, hey, you really need to go down to Egypt, get food for us. They go down to Egypt. They get grain. Joseph accuses them of being spies. They say, we're not spies. We're just good old-fashioned people. Joseph recognizes him as their brothers, the same brothers that threw him into a pit and sold him into slavery, but the brothers do not recognize him. And the brothers say, please, let us bring back grain. And they describe their circumstances about how they have another brother, and one of the brothers is dead, and they've got an old father. And Joseph says, all right, go back, but bring your brother Benjamin so I can see him. Now, why would he do that? Is it because he realizes that he's never laid eyes on Benjamin before and he wants to see him? Or is it because he remembers his younger brother Benjamin and he wants to see him? Again, we're not sure. I think the first, but it could be both. And where we find ourselves right now is, one more thing, and that is Benjamin is now the new favorite of Jacob. The new favorite of Jacob because either he's now the new child of his old age, or because he's also, which is the other reason why he would be a favorite, is because he was the son of Rachel, his most loved wife. But nonetheless, here we are. And the brothers come back to Jacob and say, hey, this guy back in Egypt insisted that we should not come back to Egypt unless we have Benjamin with us. And that's kind of where we are right now. And
one reason they don't recognize Joseph.
Yeah, why?
It's because he's dressed like an Egyptian.
That's correct. Yeah.
He was shaven.
Shaven, right.
He was shaven.
Oh,
right.
They cleaned him up.
Although a 17-year-old kid, how good's the beard back then? It's not so good. It's splotchy. Just one more thing, just to kind of talk about last week a little bit, just to kind of now bring us all the way to last week, which is that, so Reuben says to Jacob, look, send Benjamin with me, and you can trust that I will make sure he's safe, and if I do not keep him safe, then as collateral, you can kill my two sons. And Jacob balks at that. He's like, why would I ever want to do such a thing? What a terrible thing for you to say. And this kind of, I don't want to use the word confirms, but rather communicates what we've kind of known all along, which is that Reuben, who is the firstborn, is not seen by Jacob as the son that he wants to pass the family on to. So secondborn is Shimon and thirdborn is Levi. And again, those two are the ones who brought shame on Jacob when they massacred all the people of Shechem. And so Jacob does not want to see the Jacob empire, the succession of the empire, go to Shimon or Levi, which now puts us at fourthborn Judah. And Judah says, send Benjamin in my care so that we may live and not die, us and you and our children. And Jacob recognizes those words because Jacob has used those words in the past. And Jacob says, Jacob starts to get a sense of what needs to happen. That in order for their family to live, they need to go back, as painful as it is for Jacob to be separated from the new love of his life, Benjamin. He still needs to do it for the sake of any type. They're either all going to die of starvation in Canaan, or he chances it and sends Benjamin. Now the last thing about this before we continue is that what's meaningful is, as we did talk about last week, is there was that whole chapter 38, which happened kind of in the middle of the whole Joseph story, which was about Judah and Tamar. We talked about how Judah was, he had the 3 sons and they all died because of Tamar, they died and happened to have been married. Well, the first 2 happened to be married to Tamar. And so she wanted to marry the 3rd son based upon what's called the Levirate marriage. But Judah didn't want to do it because he didn't want to see his 3rd son die. But then there was a whole thing that Judah impregnated her and he realized he was wrong. And the whole point, though, being is that Judah obviously had a very significant life experience that kind of matured him in some way, so that Jacob could understand when Judah says, send Benjamin with me for the sake of our family so that we can live and not die, the future of our people are at stake here, that Jacob could trust that Judah understood what it meant to A, lose a son, and B, what it meant to really worry about the future. Now, here we are, we're on verse 12, but we'll start at verse 11. Then their father Israel said to them, if it must be so, do this. So remember, the whole thing is pivoting on whether Jacob is going to agree to send Benjamin. And they have laid their case or Judah at least has laid his case for, you need to send Benjamin with us. And so Jacob's response, after hearing this very passionate plea by Judah to please send Benjamin so our people can live and have a future, Israel says to them, if it must be so, do this. Take some of the choice products of the land in your baggage and carry them down as a gift for the man. Some balm, some honey, gum, ladanum, pistachio nuts, and almonds. So, and we talked about last week about how gum, balm, and ladanum, 3 of these things, were the very things that the Ishmaelite traders were carrying down with them as they brought Joseph to slavery. But also, you can imagine all the brothers hovering around as Jacob, as they just made their case. You have to send Benjamin with us so we can live and not die. They're all kind of hovering. And what does Jacob say? Do this, bring gum balm and ladanum and the choicest flour that you have, right? So they're all like, right? They're like, all right, fine, we're going to bring our gum balm, ladanum, pistachio nuts, and almonds, right? It's like, but, and Jacob says, our new verse 12, take with you double the money, carrying back with you the money that was replaced in the mouths of your bags. Perhaps it was a mistake. And, and they're all like, But, oh, by the way, we should just stop here for a moment and take a look at this verse. Because this verse, so how much money, you're going to be surprised by this, but how much money are they supposed to be taking with them?
100 shekels.
So let's assume they brought 100 shekels with them the first time, right? And what do we know about it? That the money was returned. So they all brought 100 shekels and it was returned. So how much are they bringing this time? 200, right? Why? Because you got to pay for the first batch and now we want you to pay for the second batch, right? Wrong. Okay, because of course that's what any person reading the English would think. But actually the Hebrew says you have to bring 3 3 times as much. The English translation is off. If you look at the Hebrew with me for a moment, and so we are on verse 12. So you have to look at the on the right hand column. You'll see 12. It says
Kesef.
V'chesef mishneh kachu b'yedchem. So kesef mishneh. Mishnah means doubled. Okay, so there's the Maimonides wrote a book called the Mishnah Torah. The Mishnah Torah, the second Torah. This is what you need to understand about the Talmud, essentially. And then the Mishnah itself is the retelling of the Torah based upon what the rabbis thought the laws should be of the Torah. And anyway, Mishnah means double. So kesef, money or silver. It means both money and silver to this day. In modern Hebrew, it just means money back then. V'chesef mishneh kechu, you should take in your hands. Ve'et, so therefore you're taking double money in your hands. And then it says, ve means and. Et means here comes the direct object. Kesef ha mushav b'fi emtichotechem tashivu biyadchem. And also you should take the money that you need to return in your hand. So take double and take the returned money. So it's kind of, it's a nuance of Hebrew, but it's really true. 3 times, not 2. In other words, what Jacob is trying to say is, don't just give them what they're due, but give them extra, because you're going to need to really butter them up here. You want to be given, what's that?
That it was like softening the deal to
Yeah.
take care of Benjamin.
We're paying double. Yeah.
Kind of like interest.
It's kind of like interest, but it shouldn't be because it wasn't their fault. But, but at the same time, it is kind of like interest, but it shouldn't be because it wasn't their fault. But still, that's what he's saying. It's take double, pay double for the new stuff and make sure you pay for the old stuff, is kind of what he's saying. And it's left out of translation, but it's okay. It's because who knows what this, but that's what the Hebrew says. Anyway, but again, so they says, take the gum, the balm, the ladanum, the nuts, the almonds, the pistachios, and then it says, right, and take double the money or triple the money, depending on how you read it. But the brothers are all like, that's all going right through their ears. They're like, okay, what about the part which is the critical part? And it's like the tension is mounting. And then it says, take your brother too. Right? Take your brother too. Right?
And I think they were being punished for not making sure that the money got into the hands of the Egyptians the first time. And regardless of the circumstances why it wasn't their fault, it was up to them to make sure that the money got into the hands of the Egyptians. And this was Jacob's way of sort of punishing them for that. Kind of like an eye for an eye.
So you're saying that you think that they should have checked and made sure that the money got passed on.
They had a responsibility to make sure that it got into their hands and it stayed there. And
yeah, I mean, I guess so.
I don't know.
That's certainly the argument that the brothers make, right? The others like, see, we told you should have, like, this is all. Well, they're not saying that they should have, but rather they're saying this is all. You know what? So let me say it differently. That the Torah kind of to some degree disagrees with you, because what it's not saying that they should have looked, but rather they're saying this is all punishment for what we did to Joseph. So God was going to make this happen no matter how much we looked in our bags to see if the money was there or not. But again, Jacob says, take your brother too. It's like he waits until the very, very end to kind of like say those, because he just doesn't want to do it. But he finally, all right, and take your brother too. And may El Shaddai dispose the man to mercy towards you, that he may release to you your own brother, as well as Benjamin. As for me, I am to be bereaved. If I am to be bereaved, I'll be bereaved. Okay. Right? It's like, have you ever heard of like a more resigned kind of like, he's like, all right, and if I'm to be, like, I guess if I have to go through this pain, I'll just go through this pain.
Woe is me.
Woe is me.
In Yiddish, soll sein so.
Which is?
Let it be so.
So, the men took that gift, and they took with them double the money. So I'm wondering, the gift must have been the gum, the ladanum, the nuts, and the almonds. And here they say, and they took with them double the money. So now it doesn't say that they took 3 times the money in the second line.
What is ladanum?
It's I thought it was like a spice, but I'm not sure.
It's not opium?
I think it is.
In the 19th century.
That's poppy.
In the 19th century, physicians prescribed laudanum to people who were having difficulty sleeping, and it was laced with opium. And they became.
But that's laced with opium means then they added opium to it.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean it is.
That it had opium in it, right?
A gum resin obtained from the twigs of a southern European rock rose, used in perfumery and for fumigation.
Thank you.
I don't know what a rock rose is.
I thought it was a painkiller.
That's laudanum. I don't know if that's the same. Laudanum is spelled differently than ladanum. I don't know if it's the same.
I don't know. That's what I'm.
And I don't know whether it becomes laudanum when it's laced with opium.
Well, why don't we just say this? I mean, why don't we just say this? That whether it's opium or whether it's a painkiller or whether it's some sort of nice perfumed, gummy substance, it's clearly something which is desired in Egypt and probably throughout the world, and it's clearly something which is a valuable trade commodity, because we know again that those Ishmaelites came back with just gum, balm, and ladanum, and not the almonds, the pistachios, and honey. So in other words, I'm sure that these Ishmaelites are like only carrying the most expensive stuff. They're not also bringing, a couple of tchotchkes from the gift shop of the snow globes. They're bringing only really expensive stuff, and so therefore I'm just assuming we can all agree that whatever it is, that it's very valuable. Yes.
There may have been other uses for the gum, but one that I'm familiar with is that it was used in inks. And so for scroll production or papyrus illumination or writing on it or something.
Fascinating.
And that was a major component.
Wow, I had no idea. That's fascinating. So the men took that gift and took with them double the money, as well as Benjamin. They made their way down to Egypt, where they presented themselves to Joseph. Again, they say presented themselves to Joseph. We know the person is Joseph. They do not know him as Joseph. That's been a really important piece to this puzzle all along, is that the brothers have no idea who he is. Because, and I did mention this before, but I do want to say it again, and that is that all of the things we've talked about are very relevant to this story, but probably the most central part of this story is Joseph trying to determine if his brothers have changed. They do not know yet if his brothers have changed. He does not know yet if his brothers have changed, right? So because understand that our story, it hinges on all of the family coming to Egypt so we can become a people there. That is how our story goes, right? Everything that really happens in Genesis is all for the purposes of just getting us to Egypt. And Joseph needs to know if his brothers are Egypt worthy. Have they changed, or should they just go back to Canaan and live out their lives there and starve to death? Because they're no good. And yes, he might miss, he's probably part of the reason he's bringing Benjamin back, because he kind of wants to see, maybe his little baby brother is innocent in all this. Because if his baby brother was not, which he wasn't there, at the whole pit incident, like, does this boy deserve to suffer the same fate as his brothers do, who were perpetrators of the pit incident? But, he's just trying to decide who's worthy to come down. And so it continues, when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to his house steward, take the men into the house, slaughter and prepare an animal, for the men will dine with me at noon. The man did as Joseph said, and he brought the men into Joseph's house. But the men were frightened at being brought into Joseph's house. It must be, they thought, because of the money replaced in our bags the first time, that we have been brought inside as a pretext to attack us and seize us as slaves with our pack animals. So, let's start with, so Joseph says, we're dining at noon, right? And the brothers are probably thinking at that moment, I wonder if we're dining with him or if we're going to be dined upon by him, right? It's like, is this, is this a total setup? Is this a trap? And that's what they're thinking, because here are these foreigners who come into Egypt a second time after having been imprisoned the first time, and they are. And now they're coming back with Benjamin, and so they are rightfully a little tense, and and you can imagine that Judah is like, Benjamin, do not leave my side ever, right? It's kind of like one of those moves. And now, instead of kind of confronting the this famous vizier of sorts, at the outdoor kind of grain dispensary. Instead, they are being invited inside to Joseph's house.
I have a question.
Yes.
Does Joseph know that Reuben was watching out for him even a little bit? Joseph was in the pit when Reuben said,
I don't think so. I don't think
he doesn't. So in his eyes, Reuben could be equal to his other brothers in terms of
viciousness. Yes, evil viciousness. Yes, I agree. I would only say this: it's certainly possible that Reuben had some sort of positive, like even if they all threw him in a pit, Joseph had to have some memories of which ones of his brothers he liked more than the other ones. Some of them were particularly nasty to him. Some of them were only moderately nasty to him. But, and I can imagine the oldest one having the capacity to be a little bit more, maybe having more to lose, but also having the most, if you have an older brother if you're 7 and your older brother is 40, or let's use closer numbers. If you've got a 25-year-old brother and you're 7 and you have other brothers who are in their teens, right? The 25-year-old brother might be a little bit more open to just, be nice to your brother. He's a little bit of a pain. But so in other words, it's possible that Joseph was positively disposed to a little bit more disposed to Reuben, but he has no idea that Reuben tried to save him at the pit. At least we don't know that he has any idea that happened. Nor do we know that it was Judah who said, let's sell him and don't kill him. Nor do we know that he knows anything about this, any of it. But what we do know is that if you were, you went on a tour of the White House, and suddenly Joe Biden said, step out of that tour and come upstairs to my personal residence, you'd be like, huh. I'm not so sure if this is a good thing or a bad thing, right? Because you would be thinking, this doesn't make any sense at all, right? So, and that's what's happening. And they're terrified for good reason.
Well, they've also had some of these like things like finding the money and other stuff. So they're already spooked by this whole chain of events.
Mm-hmm. And So I was trying to, yesterday I was thinking about, if Joseph was actually trying to give away his identity without saying it to them.
At what point?
All in the first, all up in the previous meeting, and one example coming in a few, verses later. But he slaughters a lamb for lunch, something, by the way, which is not eaten often in Egypt. Not an Egyptian at the time food. He washes their feet. Well, that happens coming up, I think. Let's see. All right, we'll take a look at it later. So, all right, so it says, also, by the way, they say they're scared, and they say, because of the money you placed in our bag the first time that we've been brought inside as a pretext to attack us and seize us as slaves with our pack animals. Like, I was kind of curious about the with our pack animals part.
Yeah.
Like, it reminds me of the story of Jonah. In the story of Jonah, the very last verse of the book of Jonah, it says, God says something, like, you worry, he's sitting in front of this little tree, and the tree is withering, and Jonah is really upset about the tree that's withering. And God says, why should I not care about the city of Nineveh? That is something, I can't remember the exact line. And then it says, the last words of the book are, and much cattle too. Which has great people and which, has repented, and much cattle too. Right? It's like this, they throw in the and much cattle too as like this little strange little, whatever. So here too, it says, he brought us in as a pretext to attack us and seize us as slaves with our pack animals. Like, who cares about your pack animals? You're going into slavery. Like, what difference does it make about your pack animals? It's a little strange, and maybe that's their statement, that they won't even be able to send back, like, not only are they doomed to slavery, but they can't even send back food to their dad, who's going to be starving to death.
I think the line from Jonah is, it has 200,000 people who don't know their right hand from
That's what it is, right? And much cattle too. And much cattle too. Thank you for remembering it. So they went up to Joseph's house steward and spoke with him at the entrance of the house. Like, entrance of the house. Like, they're kind of afraid to even walk, because they know the moment they step in that they lose any last ability of theirs to, for defense. But they whisper to that steward, that second in command, they're like, hey, come here, wait, before we go in, just kind of want to make sure everything is clear as what's happening here, because it seems a little much. I'm not comfortable going in, so we're just going to stay outside before we walk in. They spoke to him at the entrance of the house. They say, if you please, my lord. They said, we came down once before to procure food. But when we arrived at the night encampment and opened our bags, there was each one's money in the mouth of his bag, our money in full. So they think that the reason why they are coming into the house is because of the money that was returned in their bags. Well, with good reason. They think, we don't want you to think that we stole this. We wouldn't have come back down if we were thieves. We're here because, and they think, because they also don't know, again, going into Joseph's house could be a trap, but as I think we did talk about before, especially with respect to Potiphar, remember, it's like sometimes these houses have dungeons in them, so they could be literally going into a house and, hey, the dining room's downstairs. Meet you downstairs, close the door behind you, The dining room's downstairs, and and then they bolt it, lock it, and done. Right. So, and that's what the brothers think, and with good reason. And they just want to just kind of put in their that last comment to we're kind of just uttering our defense before we get thrown in jail. Hey, look, just telling you, we didn't notice the money was there until the encampment. It's not our fault, really, right? And we and then even say, so we brought it back with us, and we have brought down with us other money to procure food. This has always been our interest. Is just it's trading with you fairly. Because remember, what did Joseph? He said, "You guys are spies. You're here to see the weaknesses of our area. Like spies are and they're like, no, we're not spies. We're just traders. We're just trying to get food. Here's the money. Here's last week's money or last month's money, and here's new money. And so please know that if you're about to jail us for stealing, we didn't mean to have that happen. And here's the money. We do not know who put the money in our bags." He replied, that's the steward, "All is well with you, don't be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, must have put treasure in your bags for you. I got your payment." And he brought out Simeon to them. Wow. So they are saying, we owe you money. The steward is saying, no, the books are clean. You don't owe us anything. You got money? Boy, you must have a really good God, because God put the money in your bags, not us. Obviously, that's not the case, but that's what the steward is saying. And he brings out Shimon to them. So the brothers are now reunited, and they must be, at that moment, kind of being like, right, the Twilight Zone. They're like, now, we don't have to do anything to get Shimon back. Shimon's back with us, A. B, we have all this extra cash on hand. And C, he's telling us to chill. We're not going into the dungeon. Like, what is happening here in this palace? And yet still, it doesn't even occur to them any possibility that anything but God's just helping them. Then the man brought the men into Joseph's house. He gave them water to bathe their feet, and he provided feed for their asses, donkeys. They laid out their gifts to await Joseph's arrival at noon, for they had heard that they were to dine there. Right? So what does that mean? That's the gum, the balm, the laudanum, the pistachios, the almonds, and the honey. They're like setting it up like, hey, make it look nice. Keep everything in good piles, right? And again, as I think I told you, or we talked about, which is like, who knows if the gum, the balm, and laudanum, was the smartest thing to bring or not, because for all we know, that those smells of gum, balm, and laudanum are still kind of, those are, Joseph's having may have a visceral negative response to those smells, thinking that that's the same smell that was in that caravan of Ishmaelites and Midianites that brought them down into slavery. But who knows? But they bathed their feet, provided food for the donkeys, and they're going to dine with the vice president. It's incredible, and it must be just numbing to these people, because they must not know. And I can imagine everything is so surreal for them that they don't know how to behave. When Joseph, yes, Jim.
Is there not a passage where Jesus washes the feet of
Yes.
his disciples? Is that an echo of this, or is that just a common practice in the
common
ancient
practice?
Jesus washed the feet of the
Poor, right? It's a common practice, but it's also, by the way, someone else had. This is not the first time it's happened in the Torah. First time that happened in the Torah was Abraham. when those three angels or visitors came by, the ones who said, we're going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, the ones who said to Sarah, you're going to have 9 months from now, 1 year from now, you'll have a baby. That was what Abraham did before they said all that, was the moment they walked in, they came, he bathed their feet. So this is kind of like a
courtesy?
Yes, but I was going to say a custom of kind of these, especially the nomadic people, desert dwelling.
It's also a sign of humility.
That too.
Well, he didn't wash their feet. He just gave
Had
them
their
water.
feet, right. He gave them water to bathe their feet. And so now, so maybe now is my time to tell you about the things that I was thinking about. Like, was when he slaughtered the lamb, which is not typically eaten in Egypt, when he had their feet washed like Abraham did, when he fed the donkeys too, like Rebecca. Remember when Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, said to God, "How am I going to know which is the woman you want me to bring back for Isaac?" And God's, and he says, "Let it be the person who says, 'Let me give you water and let me give some water for your camels too,'" right? So when in the beginning, and it'll happen again, he asks them about their aging father, right? Meaning, why is he showing so much interest in our dad, right? And maybe we'll see a couple other ones in a second. So I'm just kind of pointing out the times in which that Joseph is slightly or subtly giving away his identity, intentionally seeing if they're going to bite on any of these things, which they don't. When Joseph came home, they presented him the gifts that they had brought with them into the house, bowing low before him to the ground. Oh boy. Now every single brother is bowing low to Joseph. The dream is not yet realized because he still needs dad to bow down to him. But we got all the brothers bowing low, so dream is for the most part realized. He greeted them and he said, "How is your aged father of whom you spoke?" Again, asking about the father. Like, why do you care so much about our father? We just brought Benjamin like you told us to. Is he still in good health? Like, it's almost bizarre how much interest and care this Egyptian dignitary is showing to this group of brothers who really are just here like every other group of people who have come to Egypt to get food. There's just something, why is he paying so much attention to us? It's kind of spooky, they're thinking.
When are they going to see the light?
When are they going to, and why have they not yet already? Is still in good health? They replied, "It is well with your servant, our father." So he's doing fine. He is still in good health. And they bowed and made obeisance. So in other words, yet another bow. Like they're going out of their way to, I mean, again, it's not unusual that they should be regularly bowing down to him. Of course they should. But the Torah is definitely, it doesn't talk about anybody else who bows down to Joseph, even though we know other people are doing it. So the Torah is clearly trying to make a thing out of the bowing down to communicate about how this dream is getting realized.
Now, why did they say your servant, our father, your servant?
That's
he's at home and,
That's a term of respect. They would also, your servants, we are your, humble, do whatever you ask. Now, yeah. Whatever you ask is your wish is our command, as is our Father's command too. Looking about, this is where it gets very touching. He saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son. and asked, "Is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me?" And he went on, "May God be gracious to you, my boy." So there's a lot in this verse. So let's take it slow. So looking about, he saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son.
How does he know that there's no other wife after his mother and that this could be someone else's son?
Absolutely. It's a good point. We don't know. So that suggests that he knew. So that would suggest the very fact that he said, "It's my mother's son." That would suggest that he was alive, that he and Benjamin were alive together.
Or maybe Benjamin just has a striking resemblance to his mom.
Or maybe Benjamin has a striking resemblance to his mom. That's true. So that'd be the other side. But then again, "Is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me?" That would either suggest he's trying to keep up the ruse of, "Oh, I don't know who you are," or that could suggest that he, literally didn't know, he's never seen it before. Or certainly it's been 17 years, and so a lot's changed in somebody. And then he went on. But the other thing is this? He saw his youngest brother. The Torah says he saw his youngest brother, and then it adds his mother's son. So it's clearly emphasizing that he has a special relationship with Benjamin, different from the rest of the brothers. But then it goes on to say, "May God be gracious to you, my boy." And the Hebrew says, and in order to find the Hebrew, if you see the number 30 on the right-hand side, so verse 30, go up one verse, and the last line the last word on that previous line, rather, which is the previous verse, chapter 29. But as opposed to going 29, going down two lines and over, just go up from 30. Anyway, last word is you might recognize it, Beni.
Mm-hmm.
What does Beni mean?
My son.
My son. Now, granted, like I remember when I was when I used to my high school basketball team. My coach used to call everybody son. Son, you need to, and that's kind of like old style, adult talk to children. Even kids that aren't yours, like you don't really hear it that much anymore. But kids that aren't yours, you would say, "Son," because I guess you were like son was saying like Mister, but for a young kid, you're somebody's son, and so therefore, son, go and do, so it could very well be that he's just saying, "May God be gracious to you, son," right? But on the other hand, it is kind of curious that he's calling him son. And I recognize, of course, he could be talking about son to to Rachel, or son to Jacob, but that does kind of communicate that there really is a kind of a big age difference here between them, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't call someone who's 5 years younger than me son, right? You call someone who's considerably younger than you son. It's like you call someone son if it's generational. Even if it's not your son, there's a generation there. And so the fact that Joseph is referring to Benjamin as son, it does communicate kind of a different generation. That's part of my argument about maybe he wasn't alive, right? It's my back and forth, and I'm now leaning towards he wasn't alive, but I don't know. Nonetheless, so he says, "May God be gracious to you, my boy."
Rabbi, do we know how old Benjamin is at this point?
No, we know that's the whole point, but we do know how old Joseph is. Joseph's 37. Right? Joseph is 37. If Benjamin is older than 20, because Joseph was thrown into a pit when he was 17. 20 years have passed. If Benjamin is older than 20, then Benjamin was alive. If Benjamin is younger than 20, then Benjamin was not yet alive. I'm getting a feeling he's younger than 20 here.
Well, the inference that he needs such looking after.
Yeah. A
suggests that he's
20-year-old
younger.
back then? You could have grandkids at 20. Right? It's just very striking to me. And may God be gracious to you. Right? And the Hebrew, Elohim yochnecha b'ni. May Elohim be gracious to you. So again, Elohim is not Yud He Vav He Adonai, but it is certainly kind of a reference to God, and it could be any God. But once again, is Joseph not tipping his hand a little bit? Paul, you okay?
Yeah, I just got a cramp.
Got it. No problem. Take your time. It feels like Joseph's tipping his hand a little bit here, trying to say, come on, may God be gracious to you, bathing your feet, feeding your donkeys. Like, don't I look like anybody here? Right? But no, it's not happening. And so, but his last line is, may God be gracious to you, my boy. And so, and then what happens next is just so touching. With that, Joseph hurried out, for he was overcome with feeling toward his brother and was on the verge of tears. He went into a room and wept there. Wow. Like the first time we saw about Joseph crying in the previous visit down, it was less touching. I'm trying to find the last one. Because I know he cried the first time, but I can't remember. If anyone can find it, I'm struggling to find it, the verse when he cried the first time.
It's on page 90 near the top, 42:6.
Yeah, I'm looking.
And on.
Right, that's the come. But I'm looking for the actual part where he cries. I'm on that page too. All right, can't find it, but I'm sure one of us will find it shortly. There. Verse 24. He turned away from them and wept, but he came back to them and spoke to them. And he took Shimon from among them and had him bound before their eyes. So that's he turned away, he cried, he came back, right? But this is more descriptive, isn't it? They say, it says that Joseph hurried out, for he was overcome with feeling toward his brother.
Right.
Not his brothers, his brother. And he was on the verge of tears. He went into a room and wept there. And so what are these tears? Are these like the emotion of seeing his brother? Are they the emotion of kind of thinking back about this? He really is a reflection of family. It's more of tears of what I haven't been a part of for the last 20 years. Is it the emotion?
I think he's just joyful to see his brother.
Joyful to see his brother?
Yeah. The first time when he cried, even though it was a little less significant, was in response to the brothers expressing to one another remorse.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, if it's connected, that suggests kind of tears of joy, and I think so. Really,
but if they are remorseful, is it joy, or is it like all of the kind of the walls that he has just built up for himself? He is kind of like softening those walls, because it's not as much joy. It really is tears of pain, but it's tears, but he is now feeling a little bit more open to the possibility of being vulnerable because he's seeing some changes in his brothers. And then the second one is seeing Benjamin brought out like another wave of tears, because once again he has kind of built up such a wall around his feelings and emotions having to do with all of that which has happened to him, and now suddenly it's like, and now he's seeing that brother of his again. I wish I knew if he is alive or not when he was. We'll never know.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
if Benjamin had not been born yet, wouldn't Joseph have been asking about his mother also? How's my mother?
Wow. Yes. Great point.
Right.
Great argument. Yes. Okay. So now you've just kind of pushed me a little bit more over to I'm back in the middle again. All in one day, you just watched me go. Now I'm in the middle. Good job. Great. You just made me a little bit more confused. Yeah, he would have asked about his mother the first time, for sure.
Is Joseph's mother anyone else's mother except for Benjamin's?
No, just those two.
So why would he ask about that woman?
Because
I mean, he's asked about the father,
right?
But there are a lot of wives, so typically women are not brought up.
But it is.
And if he said, well, how is, how could he even begin to say, well, how is my mother, if they don't even know that he's Joseph yet, that he's their brother?
Do you have a mother? Something like that. Maybe he could have asked that way. It's a good point. But you spoke about your father. What about your mother?
Yeah, aside from Sarah, there were no really, the women were not brought up particularly. A lot of them didn't even have names.
And that's a good point. Thank you. Thank you. So now you've pushed me back to where I was before. You've helped me by arguing Kathy's point.
All the wives have been enumerated. So if there was going to be an additional wife after Rachel, she would have been named.
Oh, no. Agreed. I don't think that's the question. I think the question is, Joseph doesn't know that unless Benjamin was born, Joseph doesn't know that there's not a fifth wife.
But the Torah knows.
Of course the Torah knows. Yeah, absolutely. We know the Torah knows the truth, but he doesn't.
We don't know what we don't know. But if there was an additional wife, the Torah would have shared that with us.
Absolutely. I'm fully in agreement that there's no additional wife. I'm only saying that the question is, why didn't Joseph ask about his mother? Now, granted, they would have said, or for that matter, even if it will be revealing of himself now, so he can't ask now, he doesn't ask about his mother later either. So it does suggest that he is aware that his mother has died.
Yeah.
Which means he knows his
brother is his actual brother, which means his brother is older than 20 right now, which is weird, but still is what it is.
All right. Well, as Arthur says, leave it to the Torah.
Well, right. So it's just kind of it is what it is. Overcome with feeling towards his brother and was on the verge of tears, he went into a room and wept there. Then he washed his face, reappeared, and, now in control of himself, gave the order, serve the meal. It's like, how do I put it? It's the brothers must be sitting there, like all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they bring Benjamin, and then they say, here he is, and then Joseph has his moment of connection with him when he blesses him, so to speak. May God be gracious unto you. And then he runs out. And the brothers their jaws must be like, what is happening here? Right? And in addition to what is happening here, it is remarkable that it hasn't even occurred to them the potential that there's something unusual about this, that special about them, and that they haven't been able to put two and two together. At this point, it's kind of becoming a little bit bizarre. Prior, maybe that they weren't able to put two and two together, okay. But now, it's like there's too much going on here. And then to have that type of now granted, it doesn't say that he cried in front of them. We know specifically he didn't, but certainly that they could have seen that he was starting to get emotional when he didn't cry, but emotional when he saw and blessed Benjamin. And then he runs out and they are just, what? He runs out and they're just waiting. And it's silence probably in this dungeon. They might be, who knows? They could, for all we know, be still being bowing down. They're definitely kind of looking around at each other like, wait, what should we do now? Right? And they're just waiting. They're probably looking to the steward like, hey, can you, do we stay here? What? Sit? Stand? And the steward has no idea, right? And Joseph's just out and he's crying. And then what does he do? He washes his face because whenever you're crying, you can see you get the red of your eyes. Washes his face, comes back in, just serve the meal, right? Which that's actually probably the most real thing, in the story is like he doesn't want to talk. Just serve the meal. I know I've been keeping you out there waiting a long time. Serve the meal, but no one talked to me. It's got so much. This one's filled, right? The other stuff is Joseph is. This story is remarkably different than the rest of, I would argue, the Torah, but certainly the book of Genesis. Maybe with the exception of King David. Do we have so much that we just kind of feel like we're in that story with him? King David gives us really, really kind of brings us into the narrative with him and makes us feel like we're really just right there with him. And nothing else does that quite. Joseph's story is kind of does it also. We really feel like we're part of this family drama right now. You can't say that about Sarah, maybe a little bit of Abraham, but not really. You can't say that about Jacob, not as much. Moses, I know we've got four books of Moses, so I'm not saying there's not a lot of stuff, but so often it just feels as if the Torah and the Moses narrative, it's not just about feelings and emotions sometimes, but for the most part, it's just about this is what we did, this is what we did, this is what we did, this is what you had to do. Joseph's just like kind of feelings.
I think there's a method to the madness. That you've got this interesting juxtaposition of the supernatural on the one hand that nobody can quite relate to, and then these human, powerful, timeless stories of brothers getting reunited, and how everybody can relate to that.
Right.
So to me, this is the way the Almighty is making the Torah accessible. He's saying you can relate to the Torah. There is the supernatural element. You can take that or leave that, but you can certainly relate to it. So to me, I think this was all by design.
This is what you call the wisdom of the Torah.
This is part of the wisdom of the Torah.
I would
and
definitely.
It's powerful.
I respect that. That's not necessarily. Again, I'm not. I would certainly agree with the part where this is exceedingly relatable, like for sure. But all of which this contributes, by the way, to this is all going to be part of the part which Joseph is going to have deemed his brothers worthy of revealing himself to them. Yeah. And why is that critical? Because that is uber critical, to use the word, because ultimately it doesn't even matter. This book of Genesis, as beloved as it is to us, and it is so beloved because, we all know, minus being here in Torah study, even prior to Torah study, if you ask the random person, tell me a little bit about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Noah, Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Joseph, people can do a little bit. But if you say, tell me about the daughters of Zelophehad, no idea, right? Because Genesis is just relatable and it's fun and pleasant, but it's great, and it's because the authors of the Torah knew they had more to work with, because it wasn't about the laws, and it wasn't about the the specifics, and it wasn't about the priests and about what they wore and about all the details that were going to become so critical to how we would be functioning. The book of Genesis served two purposes. Purpose number one was for the narrative perspective. How do we get to Israel? How do we get to Egypt, excuse me? And number two, how do we get to Israel? Which is, how do we make sense of how our people became a people when we really were part of various disparate, different tribes and peoples? We need to kind of come up with some sort of unity to the various different peoples that would all become amassed as part of the Jewish people. And how do we do that? We create families for the people who lived across the Jordan River. We create family for the people who lived up in the north or the people who lived in the south. And we give them a name and we make them part of our family. And who is that? That family are the sons of Jacob.
You lost about when you start talking about.
I didn't think I knew I was going to not lose you. I thought that I was going to, this is where we were going to digress in terms of what we believe. But go ahead, keep going.
Confused.
Go ahead.
Because we talk about not a single author, right? Because of all these
internal
inconsistencies, and which to me, my response is, why does the Torah have to be consistent to begin with? But I'm trying to imagine what an author was trying to achieve by writing so many internally inconsistent.
Oh, no. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about I'm talking about when we became Israel outside of the Torah, when we became Israel as part of in Canaan,
right.
we got and conquered Canaan. It wasn't with it was with a band of people who I would say was a single tribe, and there were various other peoples currently living in those areas, which would over time become part of greater Israel. Yeah. Now, and what I'm saying is, and as we could either say, that these random Hittites or Jebusites or whomever they were, we could claim that, they're just Midianites who then just became part of our people, or we could make them, and I put this in air quotes, adopted children, by making them tribes, giving them a name which we made as the children of Israel, of Jacob, and thus no longer is it just a bunch of random peoples who spoke different languages and believed in different gods, but rather, slowly but surely, we were able to kind of make them part of our own people. We're not different states, we're now the United States of America.
I think what Arthur may be asking is, what is the purpose of this narrative?
I'm trying to understand, was there one, you're saying that there's a dichotomy here, so part of the Torah is historical, it's literary, and that part was written by an author that talks about the tribes and then the parts that are mythological in quotes, that part was written by a different.
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that two authors both wrote mythical stories and wrote down historical narratives, and both authors.
So there were two authors.
There were more than there. There's probably maybe 7, 5, 6.
You're saying these are really authors, not redactors of the Torah, not editors.
No. I'm saying yes. I'm saying that. Well,
authored this document.
Right. I'm saying that, but it could have been that different authors didn't necessarily all write the same stuff. So you could have had a Deuteronomy author, and you had various different authors of of Genesis, Exodus, and Numbers, and maybe you had a different author for Leviticus. And what I'm saying is that so there were various different, but in many cases you had authors writing about the same stories, and that creates some of the complicated.
This is your theory, or perhaps Reform Judaism's theory, to explain all these inconsistencies and all these disparate things that are going on in the Torah.
Okay. Not my theory as much as it's the documentary hypothesis written or postulated by Julius Wellhausen, but yes, it is something which is commonly accepted in Reform Judaism and certainly by me.
But kind of unproven.
Well, again, proven, I don't know what, I mean, it's not unproven to the degree that they have evidence from the Torah itself. What someone else would argue is all fine and good. Why is that beyond God's ability to write things like that?
It's using the Torah to prove the argument about the Torah itself.
Yes, that's
so
correct.
To that extent, it's not really proof.
Correct. Fair enough.
Well,
there was no document that we found that said, hey, we're all going to be doing this. We've got this little group that we're putting together here. Meet us on the first day of Tammuz, and we'll all be meeting to have a discussion about whose stuff is going into the Torah. No, there's absolutely zero evidence yet.
Isn't it plausible that since all of this stuff before it was actually written down in stone or on papyrus, that these were could have been tales that were given to someone through God, that God told the story originally, but there was no means of writing it down. So as the original Torah, so to speak, was kind of like a game of telephone, that it was done in the oral tradition. But the oral tradition had to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So it was either, God didn't have the ability, though it's, to write this on rock or paper or papyrus. So he created this narrative. And through
gave it to Moses.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
And gave it to Moses on Mount Sinai?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And, just the way that oral tradition in every other culture has happened. It started out as oral tradition, and then someone took up a pen or a rock or a chisel and wrote it down. So yeah, Arthur could be right, and we could be right in our theories. It had to be started somewhere.
Right. No, yeah, sure. So given on Mount Sinai, again, what that does is, and I'm not trying to be make this about, like a court case, but that would suggest though that, and again, is that God gave Moses the Torah, including the parts that was wrote about his own death that would be coming, 38 years later. And all of this happened that we had in the Torah and we carried around with us, either literally on some sort of stone or in word of memory, word of mouth. But the point is that, and 38 years of information after Mount Sinai, which is possible. It's not beyond God to be able to see the future like that. But again, I mean, really, I don't need to convince anybody. I'm just and certainly far be it from the rabbi to say stop believing the Torah. But I just, but yeah, it's just for me, it just doesn't fit as much, and it works for me. It works a whole lot better just to kind of understand that these were stories that had purpose, and look that we emerged as a people from the Levites out of Egypt as a result of maybe Midian. But
at this point, I remember one thing that made quite an impression on me: a piece of clay in hieroglyphics that spelled out Jacob, Yakub, in hieroglyphics found in the desert by archaeologists.
Okay, I've never seen that, but I believe you. And what? So that means? It
means that there existed somebody named Jacob.
Right. I mean, but that's a big one, right? It's like but
it couldn't just be any Jacob. It had to be a particular Jacob. Otherwise, this wouldn't have been written on a piece of clay.
Right.
And in hieroglyphics.
All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. I think I mean, one. It doesn't but I'm not. But let's assume that it isn't exactly as you say, which I'm fine with. Okay, so we know that Jacob existed, but that doesn't mean that the stories of Jacob are historical. It means just that we know that this Jacob existed. I'm not so sure I would necessarily go to the place of Jacob existed as a result of that piece of archaeology, but I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it.
Are you saying that the Torah is just a random collection of mythological stories, and there's really nothing in particular tying it all together?
Well,
it sounds like that's what you're saying, yeah?
I mean, I would say that what's tying it together is the fact that these were the collective stories of our people from 3,000 years ago. That's not tied together.
Kind of random, right?
They all had a purpose. I mean, yeah, it's.
But I mean, in relationship to each other, kind of random.
Well, no, because I would also argue that the Torah really starts in Exodus because our people, we become a people as a result of being in Egypt. And that is made clear. It doesn't say, it doesn't say in the Kiddush, it says Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim, remember leaving Egypt. It doesn't say, remember how Abraham nearly sacrificed his son. And it doesn't say, remember how I prevented the flood, like I saved Noah from the flood, or how I brought Abraham out of Ur and brought him into Canaan. It's like we recognize that the origins of our people are Egypt, and that which came before Egypt is intro. And yeah, I would say that in just the same way that we struggle with the absence of dinosaurs being in the Torah, why can't we similarly struggle with the story of Jacob? Because that which happens because we try to make our people about Egypt and beyond, and not about what comes before. So a lack of kind of uniformity and continuity from Genesis to Exodus, I don't even think it's that kind of like I don't think it's problematic for our people. I think that, I mean, again, but what Genesis is trying to do is the author is trying to say, how did we get to Egypt? Here, all this. Because our people starts in Egypt. It doesn't start, how do we get to Egypt?
And I remember the line that says, and then there arose a Pharaoh who did not know Joseph.
Right.
And that's when they enslaved the people who were there.
Yeah. But how do we get there? We need a reason for having this slavery. We need a reason for being redeemed from slavery. All right, so what's our reason for being redeemed from slavery? Because we had this God who all along we had been following. And we were, this is what our story is. And we need to be able to be free to go back and worship God again. But that's the explanation for why we are starting our story here. Look, that's just my feeling about it.
Yeah,
it can be
the ark in our sanctuary tells that story.
Well, yeah, but that's just artistic. But you're right.
Well, but it carries a message, and that's the message everybody sees when they sit down in the sanctuary.
Yeah, still artistic though. But you're right. Yes, which is we were freed from Egypt with a purpose, and that purpose is to be a light to the nations, to be to communicate the God's vision. Now, we now can all have different views on what that is. Yeah.
The Egyptians wrote not only on stone but also on papyrus.
Yeah.
Apparently, in the time of Josiah, there was a scroll found. So that's a papyrus scroll in the temple.
Right.
They think it's the book of Deuteronomy.
Correct.
Some scholars.
Yeah.
And there are references to other books, like I think in the Song of Deborah. Is this not written in the book of Joshua or something? So there must have been other scrolls.
Yeah, and in the book and in Kings, over and over again it says, this is what happened, but all the rest of it can be found in the Chronicle, in the book of the Kings, or not the book of Kings, but in the Chronicles of the King. So, and it's like it references this other scroll, which unfortunately we don't have. But
the Annals.
What's that?
Annals.
Annals of the King, right? Yeah. All right, last thought, and then we'll call it a day.
Yeah, this is just a small historical point about writing sources. This is one of my areas of expertise. The fact that something is found written on a piece of pottery, regardless of what it's written in, was highly probable because broken pottery was the scratch paper of the entire ancient world.
Right.
There's tons of stuff found written on pieces of pottery because it was cheap, it was available.
But even scratch
papyrus
paper
was expensive,
right?
And parchment really didn't exist in the very old time, they used leather or rocks or leaves or
Right.
whatever. But pottery throughout that
Right.
whole part of the world
Was scratch paper.
was scratch paper.
No, it's really true, but still, even if it's scratch writing, anything that's found with writing is like a gold mine.
Absolutely.
Right.
And there's not a lot of it that's really, really, really old that's been found, although some stuff was found within the last year, some pretty profound, amazing finds.
Wow.
Because of work of archaeologists.
Yeah. Well, all right. It's nice to see everybody. I hope you have all we did was go over by 25 minutes, which is a flat out record for us. Nice to see you. Up 3 comments in the chat. I will read them now. Refrigerator light bulb is turned off so they can use the refrigerator. It is such hypocrisy. They all stick together and support each other. It isn't hard to them. Laudanum. Wikipedia. Laudanum is a tincture of opium containing approximately 10% powdered opium by weight, equivalent of 1% morphine. All right, fair enough. Laudanum is also an opiate.
And you can also tape the little button on your refrigerator.
Yeah, you can tape the button.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, bye everybody on Zoom. You can tape the button.
Thank you, Rabbi.
See ya. Thanks, Arthur. You can.